all of the amazing things that Africa and the Caribbean bring to us. So without further ado, we have a jam-packed session here with these amazing panelists around the African digital revolution and cyber diplomacy and things like that. So we'll just get things started. I'm going to start off with just like a quick introduction for the panelists so we can have a more inclusive conversation. We're just gonna go around starting here. Name, where we're from, what we do, and maybe a fun fact to spice things up. So I'll start. My name is Yasmin Abdi. I am a security engineering leader at Snapchat. I've been at Snap for 3.5 years. Before Snap, I was at Meta, and before Meta, I was at Google. I also own my own cybersecurity consulting firm.
Yeah.
And I do both public and private clients, public facing with defense contracts in the government, and private clients as well. So yeah, I mean, enough about me, but let's learn more about our panelists.
Hi everyone, thanks. It's an honor to be here. My name is Dr. Pro Bushem. I am the Assistant Director for the Center of African Studies at Howard University. I'm a son of South Africa, and I'm passionate about African languages, the Zulu language in particular, and technology. I created Zulunomics. I'm the founder of the Zulunomics, a platform that's meant to incorporate the Zulu language and use it as a model for other South African languages into tech platforms. Part of this, we created an app which has been downloaded more than 600 times in South Africa to help give children access, which we've hitherto thought was kind of like very natural, but we found that it's wanting. So there we go.
Good afternoon, everyone. What's the morning? Yeah, afternoon, sorry. Good afternoon, my name is Dr. Amy Wakwakume. I'm associate professor of Africana Studies, also at Howard University. I'm also the director of Data Science Center and Program. My field of interest intersects environmental justice and tech, particularly with air quality and water. I'm excited to be here, excited to talk about our program, which is an online program where we have at least 20% of our students who are on the continent and are kind of getting a degree in data science. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Evan Atipo. I'm Ghanaian American. I'm an account executive at Google Cloud. I started off my career at Oracle, selling to the public sector and government agencies for 2.5 years, and went to Amazon Web Services, where I was covering CVS Health and insurance as well, along with some side projects based in Ghana, helping to build out a startup in the hospitality industry that's called Order Convenience. And now I'm at Google. I'm back to selling to the government, and pleasure to be here.
Alright, hello everyone, my name is Anthony Atipo. I'm a software engineer at Google as well, and before that I was at a company called Robinhood in the financial technology space, and before that I was at Twitter. Currently at Google, I work on mapping solutions and making sure that data on the map is kind of fresh and accurate. And that's pretty much it. So excited to be here.
Awesome. So as we just heard, we have amazing and well-experienced panelists here to discuss the African digital revolution. So let's jump into the conversation. As we know, technology and innovation drive human evolution. So when we really think about Africa and we think about maybe like taking a step back in the 1950s and 1960s, Africa really started off as more of like a manufacturing and like agriculture, and that's how they built their economies. Moving forward, Africa started to grow at like the software and electronics. And honestly, some people say that Africa now has a lot of these like technology and like digital hubs, and kind of call it like a mini Silicon Valley in some places. If we think about the future, we think about things like ChatGPT and things of like around that sense. Just want to get the conversation started around Africa and the African market. So wanted to open it up the floor to you all and kind of discuss things around that sense. So how do you guys feel like the opportunities in Africa are starting to evolve given this new market that we're in?
So I'll start off because this is a conversation that Anthony and I have had in the past. We're cousins, by the way. But I think there's a plethora of opportunities, especially on a geographical basis. Based in Accra, at least when I worked at Oracle, we had an office there and I was continuously there making connections. But then on the continent as a whole, because you mentioned like mini Silicon Valleys, like Accra as a tech hub, if you will. You have like Lagos, Nigeria, Nairobi, Kenya, Kigali, Rwanda, then so many cities in Northern Africa. And, aside from, corporate entities also having interest in all these cities, with the entrepreneurial spirit of the Africans that we're all pretty familiar with. There's a lot of startup leaders as well. And as you mentioned, also the agricultural piece. I think that translates into technology as well. One of the most funded areas of startups in Africa is startups dealing with agriculture and fintech. And for those, like, if you think about something like mobile money and like Ghana or Nigeria or other countries as well, where essentially, Africa is the first continent that has countries that are kind of transforming into cashless economies because everything and transactions are done through a phone, which is something that's not really even accomplished here. You can't even use Apple Pay at Walmart. So I think all of those offer a plethora of opportunities, as well as, the youth. Africa is the youngest continent. And, think about the diaspora. All the people, even in the audience, we have a wide range of experiences that we can bring there and also collaborate with people that are locally based. So I think Africa is the next frontier, which is something you hear all the time. But I think in the next probably like 10 years, as the economy, like all economies are rebuilding from COVID, there'll be even more opportunities in the world prior to the pandemic.
I just want to add to that, but also go back a bit. I think we need to be clear when we talk about tech and innovation that historically before agriculture, when we look at ancient Kemet, Egypt, about science and technology, Africa is at the beginning of what is tech to the world. So I think when we talk about math, science, engineering, like Africa has had those architectural models that the world is kind of now seeing as the Googles and the oracles, right? So I want to be clear about that. Like Africa's not coming to tech for the first time now. Like we're at the beginning of tech and science and coding. So one, two. I think what we've now seen is when Africa has access to certain resources, we can equally compete with these other companies. So the challenge has been access to not having, let's say, streaming Wi-Fi or not having internet in some spaces. When we do have space, when we do have those things, what to like in Accra or Lagos, we see a thrive in it, right? So there definitely is so much more that is yet to come from Africa, but the conversations we have around how much access does the West want to provide us to be able to expose the untapped potential that exists. All right, so to add to what you were saying.
And one thing to add too, I think every time I started a job, I'm always looking up like who's involved in stuff in like sub-Saharan Africa and always connected with people. And every time they're like, especially I mentioned like, because I'm always interested in like, I'd go back to like Accra full time for the right opportunity, of course. But every time they're like, we're actively trying to get people like in Ghana and other countries. So I think like those financial investments that are coming from the West too, it proves that even large entities know that that's an important market for them.
I'll add on. One example I saw recently is, well, let me take a step back. There's been a lot of interest from venture capital, et cetera, to invest in Africa and things like that. But one thing that kind of caught my attention, which was interesting, was MTN Ghana, the biggest telco in Ghana, pioneering this project to develop an ICT hub in Accra, or in Ghana. And the idea there is to be able to train 200,000 people within the first 3 years of completion and provide 100,000 jobs. And so I think even as we're getting interest from the West and from venture capital, et cetera, I think it's also, the onus is on us and the companies on the ground and the people on the ground to provide opportunities if they can. to help upskill the population and provide opportunities. So I just wanted to drop that in as well.
So not to be negative, but there is a singular factor that kind of is a spanner on this engine. And I've just returned yesterday from South Africa. I took 9 of my students to South Africa. And while we were there, we noticed that of all the banks in a mall in South Africa, there's this bank that has the longest lines. And the people there are usually, they come early in the morning to Capitec. Well, and then another thing, I noticed that there was when I was at the bank myself, FNB, there was a mama who would come and there was no line. But this mama would come and they would say, well, go to the computer and press so you can get a ticket. She would say, no, you help me, in Zulu, okay? So there's a barrier to all what these things we're talking about. Language. This mama does not want to speak English. This mama wants everything in Zulu. These people who line up in this bank, they line up because when they go to the teller, which you saw yesterday, but they speak Zulu. It's in Elimali, it's 100. So in other words then, for us to be able to take advantage of the full fulcrum of what were just these exciting things we're talking about, I'd like us also to zoom out, and that's the area of my, I suppose, study. This looking at how African languages then can also be gateways to help Africans participate as full citizens, so that they don't have to lose a certain part of themselves or participate as second-class citizens because they're not proficient in the lingua franca, whatever it might be.
When you look at like the ChatGPTs and open source, like it's not translatable to every other African language. It's forcing you to kind of think in English. Like my mother speaks English, understands English, but she prays in Akan. So like you cannot change that sense of who she is because she wants to use the technology, but there isn't a sense of equal access for African peoples, for humanity to tech, which is the challenge.
Yeah, and that's a great segue into our next conversation. I really just wanted to focus more on like technology and like how that can benefit and just maybe like bring out new opportunities in Africa. So like as we've spoken about today, the recent development of these new technologies just exemplifies how Africa can be more successful. So when I think about, in my career specifically, I've met a lot of like super successful African entrepreneurs and African leaders in this space. There's actually an African entrepreneur that I met recently who was able to secure over 35, who was actually able to secure over $35 million in funding for his company. He's a West African man, and he started a new platform that's just really built on these new emerging technologies and just bringing different opportunities and new opportunities to Africa and to the whole continent. So just wanted to focus this next topic and this next conversation on Africa and how emerging technologies and just technology in general can kind of exemplify the continent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like prior conversations, I remember one day we were in that and I was thinking about, so like I said, in my day-to-day work, working on a lot of solutions with the government on the state and city and county level on different projects. So you were mentioning language. So language equity is a big thing that we work with a lot of cities and counties on, especially in California. There's so many people from, let's say, like Central America, from Asia, and I think that's a huge use case on the African continent. And luckily, I think Google, like they're pretty big on language equity, but I think it's really like innovative solutions. Like I remember I was talking to you about like using satellite imagery to identify. I mean, especially unfortunately, like in Ghana, sometimes roads can be pretty poor, but utilizing like satellite imagery to identify which areas need, more paved roads or things like that. I think there's so many different things that you can use technology for. It just really depends. I think every country and geographical area is different. Think about climate change and how that affects people and different demographics of people, and even on a socioeconomic level. So it's just really being creative, like that creativity piece. I think technology in general allows people to take these ideas and then extend them like pretty far. Yeah.
Think about how universities kind of function as hubs to innovation. One of the biggest, I would say, don't quote me on this, businesses is MIT. Right? MIT is a college, but they fund students to be innovative, start businesses, right? So I think for the content, it would be helpful for higher education to be supported, to support students and support individuals to create innovation, right? And then be able to be scalable, right? Having some access to mentors and seed funding, like something there has to be marriage between the teaching and the learning, also with the innovation that can be supported as it has been in the US, that will kind of spark. And for the young people who are there in numbers, like you said, they will feel supported. So I think right now the disconnect between me going to college, me graduating, and me finding a job. But if there was a mix between the national service in Ghana and you getting some seed funds to kind of have a prototype or start a business that's supported from the university, it would, with tech, I think would spark more fires.
And I think there must be motivation, I would say, also to people. There must be motivation for the Africans, and I'm interested in the motivation that involves African agents. What is it that Africans themselves are able to do? And I come from the perspective of what's going on in the world. In China right now, for example, some of us, I'm sorry to disappoint, some of us who are wearing what we think is African print, it comes from an AI computer in Zhejiang Normal province in China. And they take one print from Africa and they put it in a computer, it's like CAD, and it makes 100 iterations of the same print. Maybe, so indeed something you might pass on as kente cloth. Now a question might be asked, why is there no university in Ghana that studies the kente cloth for commercialization? Right. Why is it that at Zhejiang Normal University you can get a master's in African commerce? And show me an African university that has a master's in African commerce. I'll give you $1. So in other words, that our agency, the African agency, must have, as Professor Yeboah has been saying, making money, economic development, the empowerment of our mothers and our sisters who are already at the forefront and super motivated. So this is the challenge that is before us as technology is moving fast at a faster pace. What are the Africans doing? And my point here is that the Africans, if they're not doing anything or they're doing something little by little, the Chinese are marching ahead, and as I've seen it. So.
Yeah, amazing points. I think as you mentioned, as technology is just advancing faster and faster, and different agencies like China are able to catch up and even kind of in some capacities take over. Wanted to shift the conversation a little bit and focus on cybersecurity, my favorite thing, all things cyber. So as agents and nations are able to understand our technologies and just like maybe break our software, find the vulnerabilities and all of those things. I was doing some homework before this panel, and I read some statistics around Africa and the cybersecurity realm of things. Approximately 90% of African businesses are currently operating without any cybersecurity protocols in place, which, as we can tell, makes them just super vulnerable to cyber threats that are ongoing. And yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about just like the cyber diplomacy and cybersecurity. It's estimated that the continent loses billions of dollars every year just due to the lack of not having this infrastructure and just being more like prone and to these attacks. So just wanted to maybe discuss the importance of having cybersecurity as we're building these emerging technologies and as we're building infrastructure. A lot of people say that, oh, cybersecurity is an IT problem, not a business problem. A lot of people are very reactive, and only after something happens to them start to think about cybersecurity. And I think it's really important that we as people and we as like using these emerging technologies, and as we are starting to build in Africa really at the forefront and at the grounds thinking about cybersecurity. So just wanted to open up the conversation, speak on my favorite topic. If you guys have any points on that, would love to hear it.
Yeah, my background kind of intersects a bit in cybersecurity, but I think it's also a global issue. I just about 2 weeks ago I was working on a project with a school district in California, and in the middle of the meeting they were under a cyber attack, which is interesting. But like I said, it's a global issue. I think even in the United States, a lot of especially with the government and companies as well, cybersecurity protocols, we all get those notifications, your information was a part of some data breach, and I feel 10 years ago that was a big deal, and now it's kind of normal, which is really unfortunate. I think, in my own opinion, which is really scary, to be honest, is Chinese influence, or even in a lot of other countries in Africa as well now, Russia is coming in geopolitical situations, and it's really for nobody's benefit but their own. But if you go to Ghana, even MTN, your MTN router is coming from Huawei, that Chinese telecommunication company, and then all the other random, the knockoff iPhones and all these Android phones that are coming from China. But literally, so a lot of your internet traffic, your personal data is all going to the Chinese Communist Party, which is very, very problematic. And then obviously that's, from a government level. So I think it's a really big problem. In terms of ransomware attacks, which is very prevalent here in Europe, I mean, depending on the situation, I don't know that I'd have to look more into that in terms of on the continent how that looks, because I don't think hackers in North Korea think they're going to get $50 million from some kind of mid-sized company. But I think it's a really well. I think, in my own opinion, I think the biggest thing is personal data, and all of that is obviously data is in today's world, just as you mentioned, AI and everything else. All that is built on top of data. The most expensive stuff out there on the market is all of our personal data, and none of that is getting utilized for our personal benefit. And that's why it gets sold for so much money. So I think there should be a big focus. I don't think there's enough focus on it, but it takes individuals like yourself who has an extensive background in cybersecurity to make that difference.
I would say, number one, I think the content as a whole, and from a philosophy standpoint, doesn't see itself as a virtual community as the US. So my virtual self and my personal self are in this US context the same person. I have a digital account, everything is digital. I think the continent, my mom, she doesn't have a digital persona that she believes needs securing. So it's one. Two, I think it becomes a governance problem with the continent again, as well as, with more data becomes more control, and I don't think people are still trying to figure out who they are when it comes to data across the continent, and is it worth protecting, and who would take from it, right? Which is the governance conversation. And then the last thing I'll say is, it does, because we have these borders, but have these extended borders with China and other people, it's also very hard to conceive what can you realistically secure when most of what we use is coming outside of the country, right? So there's no way to really create boundaries until we build infrastructure for telecommunications in the continent, and then we bound it. But right now it's coming out, so you can't control what's coming out of the country as a secure space. So I think more infrastructure. I believe at the last major White House summit, it was said so people were investing to build infrastructure on the continent itself, which would then create a boundary to secure.
It's really random, but I think e-commerce is probably the most important. In the horizon, once the continent or country by country gets e-commerce right, then I think so much more development will happen, right? Because with e-commerce comes logistics, which comes especially with the new free trade agreement, it will help kind of unify things.
I was going to say also, you're right with e-commerce, because I remember there's a place called Union Buildings, right, by the president's office in South Africa. And there are mamas that many of you who've been to South Africa, you see they sell things. And usually you're expecting to pay cash, and the mama had the machine, and she was ready for you to tap. And you can give the tip. Imagine the empowerment this mama has. This mama has penetrated a field and has gone through a certain space that most South Africans don't. Without college, without an education, so to speak, that we would think would get you into this space. Hence the importance then of looking at things that broaden the space to include more mamas like her. That is why then, within this technology space, we must be looking at things like text-to-speech technology, so this mama can speak, and then the texts in English though she speaks Sisuthu. And I'm speaking with a sense of urgency, because the Africans will cry when the Chinese come in, and they're working on it right now. Right now. So another one that I would say also, it's sometimes on cybersecurity, people consider it, what does it have to do with my child going to school and buying them uniform? You know, so I agree with Professor Ebo that there are some of these problems that we think are huge problems that are based on how much is my data worth. Do I even have a credit score in a country of 35, where 35 are unemployed, as South Africa is, right? So if I've never entered the job market, there's no credit score to protect. My name is still mine, my neighbors know who I am. So there's no conception of a cyber self, as Professor was saying. So there's a lot of education that needs to take place in empowering our people and broadening the cyberspace as a planet, as a space of existence that we can be part. And I think some of this then touches to why interdisciplinary collaboration must take place. If you are into data and you don't make friends with the social scientists, you won't understand why this mama is important. So it's a time for interdisciplinary collaboration.
Well, also on the point, like you made a good point, but I think also like when we're looking, even cybersecurity is not all about like foreign adversaries as well. Like for example, like the Ghana card thing, right? Like all of your biometrics are there, it's collected in one place, and I don't think it's very secure. But that is like linked to so many different things, and if you're able to get into that system, I can go, which has been happening actually, I can go and take out, 100,000 CD loan in your name as yourself. So, I think there's still risk associated, but yeah, because there's always, bad people everywhere. So,
yeah, no, I think I just like piggybacking off of everything that was said. Data is your biggest asset, as we know, with all of the different, just sectors of the world, whether it's healthcare, whether it's transportation, whether it's farmers, every aspect is just like very intertwined with technology these days. So I wanted to continue the conversation around security and things like that. And I think as we're continuing to build these models and these new technologies that involve continents all over the world, how do we ensure African inclusion while we're building for people? So we're building these products, we're building these things, not only for China, not only for America, not only for these different countries, we're building to be super inclusive. So just wanted to kind of talk around that and see how are we ensuring African inclusion? How are we strengthening the African expertise that we have in the market to really build these new emerging technologies with a diverse and inclusive perspective?
I'll jump on this one. I think of this in a two-part fashion. One is providing support and guidance for people on the continent who are already building, and then the other is, in a sense, building for the continent. And when it comes to building for the continent, I feel like a lot of times people attempt to take solutions that work in the Western world and drag and drop them onto the African continent, and a lot of times it doesn't work out. There's numerous examples. And so that's kind of where the idea of actually providing support and guidance for the people on the ground who are more intimately aware of the problems they're facing comes in. And I'll just give one example. There's a company, or maybe two. There's one company called Ladder, which a friend of mine started actually. And what they do is, it's a financial technology company, and they allow people who earn in Ghana cedis to actually save their money in dollars to hedge against inflation. So if you look at last year, at the peak of the economic downturn, the cedi lost about 30% of its value compared to the US dollar, right? But in a sense, with that company, you're saving your money in dollars, so you're hedging against that sort of risk. So that's one example, and they are they are well off. They have like funding and things like that, but it's sort of a great opportunity to support people on the ground who are doing things like this. And another example is a company called Complete Farmer, and they are sort of into precision agriculture. So once again, it's all based on data, it's all based on information, and that sort of thing. So also providing support and guidance to companies like that that are at the forefront of the fields and are employing technology to address different issues.
I'm saying, well, one of the things that are important for us to do is to study the Africans. History is important. It really is. It's a laboratory that tells us where we've gone wrong. Post-independence Africa, many states, especially I pick Tanzania, because many African leaders came back from abroad, us, the diaspora, it doesn't mean we're going to call it, but us, and they've been living, they had learned the best practices, great. However, they had a stunning misunderstanding of their societies. One of them, I think in Tanzania, was Mwalimu, God bless him, but he forgot that the Tanzanian people know who they are. They don't want to live in collectivization farms, even no matter how much it produces of the economy. Like in China, where you can't do that because the government says so. But the Africans know who they are. They might speak Swahili, but they still know who they are. So in other words, they don't want to be erased. They don't want to be erased. And we've had years in this laboratory of history to see that the Africans don't want their languages erased. They like their language. Only 10% of South Africans speak English at home. Just think about that. South Africans, even when they say they speak English, they're uncomfortable speaking it. I still don't speak English very well. So in other words, look at the limitless potential that entrepreneurs going into Africa, us, if they utilize some of these things, they can actually, if they learn some of these things about the Africans. So I said, one is to not take anything for granted. Just because we're originally from Africa doesn't mean we know a lot more than the people. And we need to dedicate a lot of resources to learn the people and be able then to what my brother is saying, organize with the people and help them help themselves so they collaborate.
I would say, I think I forgot the question honestly, but I just want to say, I think in many spaces, particularly, we talk about the Africa brain drain. We have people from the continent coming to the US here to study. Many times they're brought to these spaces to study European and American topics. So I would say if we can give space for Africa to ask its own questions in these spaces and its own solutions for its own spaces, I think we would find those are spaces of opportunity. I think many times we have many students come to spaces and we're solving problems for America, right? We're solving problems for Europe. We're trying to figure out how to make Europe more secure Google, but you know, where's the space where we can just think about a Google X space for South Africa? How do we build that? How do we fund that? And then I'll go back and do that. But many times we're like dealing with the whole world's problem. We're getting things for everybody's problem. We don't have time to think about what and how we want to solve our own problems with support. And I think if people would invest in that, we'll find opportunities and growth as a whole.
I mean, I think there's a lot of different perspectives. Like, for example, Anthony and I, he grew up in Ghana, and I grew up here, and we're both in the same field. We're probably thinking about different ways to address certain things, even in Ghana on the continent as a whole. He would be on one end of the spectrum, and I would be on the other. But then if you throw in 3 or 4 additional people within that spectrum as well, at the end of the day, though, there could be a good outcome and a solution that works for everybody. So I think it's a lot of the conversations like this, like based off of something somebody mentioned, we might align to somebody's interest in here, and then they connect with somebody else who's somewhere else, and then I think it's like a collective approach between all parties involved.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I agree. I think something that you mentioned earlier, Africa just being the youngest continent, it's projected to be quadrupled in the next century. Hopefully we're all able to make it to that time. But just wanted to see is there ways for the youth in the continent of Africa to really just get into maybe some of these conversations? And I know knowledge and just education is a great start for learning and to be interested in these things, but are there any other opportunities that you guys would kind of advise to people to get into these breaking emerging technologies, to get into the cyberspace, to get into these discussions, things of that sort?
It's interesting. I think technology has created more access, like the Twitters, the YouTube, universities. They're definitely a way to be a TikTok. Like my mom loves TikTok.
My mom loves TikTok too.
Thank you. There are many ways in which technology has created this kind of shared access where you could be a Howard but not be a Howard. You can be access. So you can do it, but there still is a gap because not everyone has internet, but everyone has like mobile access. So. But I think from, I guess, my perspective at Howard, any student who emails me or reaches out to me, we are willing, I'll say I am too, we are willing to kind of begin to kind of create pathways because that's why we are here, to be this bridge, to be this way in which if you have ideas and you're looking for an institution that can support your ideas, come to Howard. If you're looking for mentors, come to Howard. And we can find ways to connect with private and public sectors, but I think the higher ed has to be that medium space that the country doesn't have enough robust higher ed options for it. I think the primary school is there, but there's a higher ed, it's like really narrow. And if you can't get into college, you're kind of like left out. But I think on this side of the water, we have to open ourselves up to allow more fluidity in the conversation.
I think you mentioned that access is a big thing. I think equitable access is like that's supposed to be the biggest thing. And that's like my new phase. I'm always thinking about like how can this be equitable for access to everybody, and like it's kind of weird. But I think that's the thing. So somebody who's, let's say, in Accra going to some international school, and somebody who's maybe in a less fortunate situation can still have some sort of like similar access to tons of different things, like for example through some online initiative by Howard or even a university or like in Ghana or like uni in Lagos, Nigeria, it's just
I think my contribution would be also, I think for young people, they need our help. They need our help, whoever is a stakeholder in this, in being citizens of the internet. And because the internet has given a kind of a mirage that there are no more borders, you are where you are, meanwhile you're in your bedroom, at home, with the door closed, and the whole world is talking to you except your parents. So, and remember you are in this world when you're on the bus, you are in this world when you are between breaks in school. So this world, you inhabit this world more than you inhabit the world of your parents. Is that the same way in South Korea? Do they have a culture in South Korea? I'll tell you they do. Does their culture reflect on their internet? I'll tell you it does. Right? That's why Chinese TikTok is different from American TikTok in being permissive and however you think of these things. So the Africans, then again, I like things that hold the Africans accountable. That the solutions, however the cookie crumbles, are with you here. So whether you get called a dictator or not, it's to you. What each country then must find out, what is our culture? What does it allow? And because our children now inherit a space without our permission, without our calibration, without our say-so, we need to quickly get a hold of this culture. Because now TikTok is pretty much educating our children. This is a hard pill to swallow, but if we're thinking about wholesome solutions, how the youth of Africa, who are the majority, can take advantage of the internet, we must also think about solutions to protect them from the internet.
I agree 1,000 times over. That was very powerful. I think, yeah, I mean, just like as you mentioned, with the access and easy accessibility of the internet around the world, we need to make sure that there's secure protocols and secure ways that we can protect our people from that. Yeah, both my parents migrated from Africa here in their early 20s, and they're both here. So, hi parents. But yeah, no, I think that's just an amazing point that you made. So it's really important that we are, like, as we are evolving, as we are breaking into these like new emerging technologies and building space for us, we're also securing and protecting that landscape. I wanted to open it up for questions. If anyone had any questions, comments, concerns, clarifications, or anything of that sort, yeah, please, if you don't mind, just mention your name and your question.
Do I gotta stand?
Yeah, you have to stand.
Okay, so, you don't hear me, right?
No, she's right.
No, it's okay.
It's okay, just project.
Okay, so, I'm Derek.
Hi, Derek.
Pretty much. Hello. So, you mentioned earlier on in the panel that data is your biggest asset,
It is.
right? So, I was also thinking the improper management of data is the greatest liability. So with, may I please sit?
Yay! I'm just kidding, you can sit.
So with the improper management of data for a lot charging into Africa, whether it's fintech companies or infrastructure or future proofing in terms of there's steps you would skip in the development of infrastructure to just make everything modern or postmodern solutions. That's a lot of data that's going to be existing and around, particularly user data. Particularly for individuals that might come from other continents or nations doing business in Africa. Most of their solutions are a significant model for how they would go about creating solutions to deal with African problems would be, as was mentioned before, copy paste something that works in your nation to work in Africa. Something that gets a bit of oversight in that relating to the cyber realm is the administration of all that, right? So I know I'm in cyber, that's my primary, occupation field. The technical and logical controls are the sexier part of cyber solutions, but not the administrative.
Mhm.
So you mentioned culture earlier, and you also mentioned people bringing solutions, but I was wondering if you guys had anything for more of the administrative solutions coming from the top, and what can be done to shift the political lens. Because just to throw out an example, the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution deals with protecting against illegal search and seizure for US citizens. However, relevant to this, say I, as an American, decide to create a business here to deal with African problems. My solutions are American, but my data isn't American.
Mhm.
If my data isn't American, it doesn't do diplomacy any justice if my data can be ravaged, so to speak, or just like pretty much picked apart and investigated as being foreign. That doesn't do my business any justice. That doesn't do diplomacy relations between the United States and whatever African country any justice, anything like that. I was wondering if you guys had any ideas or knowledge on that topic of conversation for what can be done to drive more political awareness or shift the focus of the political lens to that great oversight in any solution that would benefit Africa.
I think a good example of that is, are you familiar with GDPR in the EU?
Yeah.
Is that kind of aligning to what the point you're making?
Right.
Am I on the right track? No, am I on the right track? I'm trying to-
Yes, but Africa, or most African nations, might not have.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm saying, like, case in point, that would have to be a big push. And that can even come from maybe like the AU, like the African Union. But I think, what's interesting? Like, Cadmill, he's telling me this is a great example. You can probably go on LinkedIn and find I've actually done this. So. And find like the Minister of Information of like Guinea-Bissau, and reach out to them. And most likely, especially, are you actually like starting your own business or like some sort of? Well, if you did, you can say, hey, I'm a U.S.-based individual. I have this idea that raises a lot of concerns. I think it could literally be you who actually starts these conversations.
And you know, that's the interesting thing. Like most people are just kind of 2 clicks away from the internet. Like nothing can stop you from emailing Tom Brady. You know, you can direct message him on Instagram. But I think you know, you can find these people and actually raise these issues, or you can take it up as an initiative. That's actually really, like, I'm happy you brought that up. That's something I've never thought about before. But then, like, you have like that blueprint from like the GDPR standpoint as well, and like that was a big deal, you know. But it wasn't like GDPR was like a big push, and it wasn't for like a small reason, because that's like data residency, like that's a huge issue.
I think you bring up a good point as far as policy, right, being in place. You can have ideas or businesses, but there's no policy that is enforced and managed and monitor, things fall short. I think the challenge we have with people is that people are not in place forever, right? So you may talk to one person who loves your idea, makes a policy, next election, they're gone, right? So the sense of like, how do we create a culture where people understand what's happening and value it, and then you have a policy in place, and then people can understand this. So I think so putting people there with policies without the cultural understanding, there needs to be language built around it, will be a challenge. So people if they don't value data, they won't find needs to kind of be secure by it. Or, so, you know, it has to go together. The policies, yes, the people to enforce it, but the cultural piece, if the community doesn't get it, then you kind of waste your time, then you have to go to election again, you have to vote on again, and it kind of becomes a challenge.
But I think if that's like a personal initiative that you're interested in, like I said, like these things, these days with technology, it makes it so easy to kind of get that started. And let's say you can kind of build your own consortium of people that you reach out to, and then it can become like a continent-wide thing as well.
So I would add a couple of things. I do security for my day-to-day job. I'm a security leader at Snapchat, and I've been in security for a couple of years now. I was actually on a panel last week with our data compliance officer, and a couple of the key, are we wrapping up? Do we have to go? Are we in trouble? Okay. Just quick note on that. I think a couple of the things that stood out for me during that meeting was just really when you are building your features and you're building your services, to have security and privacy principles in the design phase as you are implementing these new things. And what that really means is, one, like giving users full control over their data, so allowing them to know what data we're storing, how are we storing it, where is it being stored, all of these different things. I think, as you mentioned, data is our biggest asset, and I think that's super important that you brought that up, because companies like Google, companies like Facebook are making hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars on our data, so it's really important that we bring things like that up and give our users the full control and full responsibility of their data, and just being super transparent with, like I mentioned, where are we storing it, how are we storing it, and things of that nature. And then I think secondly, I think it's super important that we also communicate what we're doing with that data. So are we giving it to advertisers? Are we sharing that data? The company that I work at, Snapchat, it started off as a private one-to-one messaging company and one-to-one sending pictures company. So private by default is like our motto and things that we stand on, our principles that are baked in. But I think it's super important that because we are private, we are not sharing that and just like honing in on that. So I think just transparency, control, responsibility over that data, because you can make hundreds, if not billions of dollars over it. So that's just what I would add.
I'll add one more thing to that, and that's on usable privacy. So have any of you signed up for some service and there's a 20-page long document that you don't read? Right, exactly. These things are sometimes prohibitive in the sense that, well, let me just back up. These things exist sometimes, but they're not made in a way that it's actually usable for people. And so I think one of the big things to keep in mind as well is the usability of all of this, so that people understand and actually know, you know, what Yasmin was talking about, what their data is being used for, how it's being stored, etc. But it's presented in a way that's familiar and easy for people to digest in the right languages, in the right context, so that they understand what's actually happening there.
One thing that's kind of interesting and scary is if you go on your have like a Gmail account, and you know you get targeted ads for everything. There's a somewhere in the UI where you can go. I think it's under the Google Ads settings, And you can go and pull up the personal profile that Google has for yourself, and it's like maybe like 20 different fields. So I look at, like, they know I work in technology, they know where I live, they know I'm single, I rent an apartment, I like the Premier League soccer, and but it's like 20 pages, but it's insane, yeah. That'll shock you, like, because they even have like your income.
Projected.
People that, you know, yeah.
But then again, the point is that you can actually access this and see exactly what kind of profile they have on you, and you can delete and you can remove whatever information is there if it makes you feel uncomfortable, right? So.
Sure, I think we have another question.
Yes, so my name is Natalie Steiner. I'm the Executive Director of the Mayor's Office on Caribbean Community Affairs. This is a very light question.
We need those.
And it's something I heard repeated several times, and I just want to get clarification for myself. I've always considered Africa the country everyone is from, meaning Africa first, and then we all broke off into continents, different continents. And I heard multiple times that Africa is the youngest continent. And I'm still thinking about that. How is Africa the youngest continent when, and I believe her name is Lucy, oldest known person, Lucy, is from Africa. So where did that term come up? You know, we are the youngest.
As young as in young,
The age
large
of the
young
population.
population.
Oh,
The
it's
average
based on
population.
population.
Like the age of the average age.
The age
Like,
range of.
we have a large young population.
Yeah.
That's what, thank you. I was like, youngest, wait a minute.
You know, they say,
What you say?
I was gonna say, you know, black don't
Yes.
you took it at me.
We're the first on the scene in a human conversation.
Yes, because when we think about legacy and you're saying technology, how there's things that can happen in Africa with data and businesses, and I feel that, why is it, I'm from Jamaica, and I think to myself the same things, why are certain quote unquote basic things not even happening here? And I see one of the things we're missing is our legacy, to know this is where we're from. So that's why I got caught up with the youngest, and now I understand.
No.
Okay.
I think that the legacy history conversation is a interesting piece. We talk about like computer science and fractals. That's all like textiles and textures and
Yes.
kente. Like so, the same thought process. It looks differently. It has Google on it.
Yes.
But if you go back to the thinking of even around like FaceTime and VR, AR, like seeing people, like some of those philosophies are African philosophies that
Yes.
people have had access to be able to lift it up to a certain platform to market. But the idea of technology and Africa being we're at the beginning, right? That's where the origins of tech in Africa that exists to be told, but we're young in population.
Yes.
I think there's a young, bubbling population, I know there is, that needs more access, that has ideas, that has innovation, but needs resources, or reparations needs to happen for us to be relocated back to where they came from.
Thank you.
Questions?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marcus. I appreciate all of y'all, especially this panel, because I was on so many notes and processes, and I'm like, I can't figure out how to truncate everything. The reason why I say that is because I'm a business owner. I'm in the wellness, wellness space. I've been to I'm on the board of an organization called Youth in the Free World, which actually helps young black men between 18 to 24 to gain a little perspective as well as leadership development in the U.S. and being able to happen and travel to Ghana to actually have that kind of global experience. I also have studied Mandarin, and so to talk to Chinese, I was like, we're doing a lot. I've been to China twice as well. And so I think not only what has been a great conversation, he's working with Google as well, as well as working on the side as a performance coach. I'm glad that there was a really big emphasis on this sort of cybersecurity and moving to make sure that we report, especially while working at Google for the time. There wasn't too much to try to make sure that your personal stuff is not being transferred into kind of the corporate side. I'm saying excellent things to yourself because you want to make sure everything is not leaked in some shape or form. So I think based on each person's expertise, I'd like to know just off the basis, how did you get into conversations on cybersecurity? Where did that interest spark? Why is that if we're looking for interest? Because I don't think we went fully into what that is.
I can start. How I got into cyber. How I got into cyber, well, my dad. My dad, back when I was in high school, just told me that it was cyber or it was nothing else. I went to the University of Maryland, and he was like, "Do you want your tuition paid for?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do." He was like, "Okay, you have to study cybersecurity." And I was like, "Okay, I'll do that." But I think for me, like, that was probably, just fast forward, that was the best decision then. Like, back in 2015, I didn't really know what that was. I didn't really know anything about cybersecurity. It was a buzz term at that point, but moving forward, as the years progressed, that's just has been the best thing that I've done. I constantly like being challenged, and I think with technology and like the landscape and the evolution of things now, security changes every single day. It's kind of like a cat and mouse game. Like, there's bad actors that are breaking into your software, there's a patch that comes out, and you have that little annoying notification from Apple, like, update your software. So I think for me, like, just like that constant evolution of being challenged, being questioned, using my brain. Like, I don't want to go to work and just have to do the same thing every single day. So with security, that has just been something that I noticed was super fun, and that's kind of how I got into things. And I mean, yeah, I think just like thinking for the next 20, 30, 40 years, and just like the future, it'll always be something that is progressing. As you can see, like, if we look back, like, technology has only advanced healthcare, it's only advanced transportation, it's only advanced businesses in all aspects. So when you think about that, under the hood and the infrastructure needs to be secure. Our data is our biggest asset, as we keep mentioning today. So for me, just knowing that, and just knowing all the amazing opportunities that come with security and all the amazing things that happen, I knew that that job and just that field was something that I wanted to get into and spend some time in. Oh, and I think we're wrapping up, so if we could just do maybe like a lightning speed, like less than 20-second answers, we can do that.
So I came into the data world. I'm not in cyber ideally, but COVID. So it seems as if tech and AI was providing solutions during COVID to everyone else but people of color. So I jumped in to kind of see what's going on. I appreciate you all have to run. If you need me or you want to talk more, definitely Google me, LinkedIn, email. Thank you all.
I studied technology management in college, so I had nothing to do with technology. And then, but I was using a lot of applications, like Oracle applications at Oracle. Then, like, I just randomly was like, you know what, I want to get into doing software sales. Like, my dad did pharmaceutical sales for a while. And then, so obviously get exposed to technology in that realm. I thought cybersecurity was really cool. But just in general, just seeing how technology intersects with kind of everything we do. Yeah, software sales is a cool career.
No, please go ahead.
10 seconds. I build software for a living and security support, so it factors into everything I do, basically. Yeah.
Okay, well, this was, did you want to say something real quick? Okay. Well, I just wanted to say thank you all so much for coming. This was an amazing panel. If you want to reach out to any of us, please feel free to.
There it is, guys. That was a very interesting conversation right there. A lot to think about as far as you know, IT, technology, and cybersecurity. I didn't even think about cybersecurity. That's something I think we need to talk about, because if that's an industry we can get in, we have plenty of African American, African diaspora, African Latino, African Caribbean, continental Africans who are experts on every field involving IT security, programming, engineering, coding. We can do all that. So me, myself, I'm not involved in those fields, but I know a lot of people who are involved in those fields. And that might be something that if I can't do directly, I can at least help facilitate those who want to get involved in that field do. So that's something that we definitely need to talk about. If you guys are interested, go to my WhatsApp group. You can find it in the description section. Come into the Afro Think Tank Bridge Project, where you will get in contact with potential investors who are looking for other investors to do business in Africa, and also people who have businesses in Africa or businesses in the Black diaspora who are also looking for investors or business partners as well. So that's all I got for now, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this forum. Learn something, teach something. I'm out.